So my name is Dennis. I'll talk to you a little bit about forecast and what we do and how AI has helped us come a very long way. And then Jakob will talk a little bit more specific about kind of how we use AI in the product and why AI is an important part of the way we run our business. One comment on Anders' funding thing that I would say is that one thing that's really key to building AI startups, there's a lot of funding coming in, but you also have to realize that it just takes longer and it's more difficult to build AI startups, right? So even though there might be a lot of funding, you need more funding to make it work, right? Because otherwise you will die on the way there. So just to put that as a note. I think that's also why you are seeing a lot of funding going into AI startups, because you're seeing that a lot of investors come in optimistically, right, and they realize, oh shit, this will take a long time, right? I need some researchers and all kinds of stuff that's pretty heavy, and then that requires more funding to make it work, right? So I'll tell you just a little bit about how we're growing. Last year we grew 300%. This year we are growing a little bit more than 200%, and how we're generating quite a lot of business and quite a lot of interest by providing a solution that's AI-driven in a field that's pretty old school. So the product we're building is, to some extent, a little bit of a generic product, right? It can be used in a lot of industries, a lot of verticals, and all over the globe, right? So this is just a picture of some of the places where we have customers. We have customers now in almost 50 countries. And as you can see, the majority of our customers are coming from the US. Even though we're purely based in Copenhagen, we don't ever set our foot on the ground in the US, except when I go fundraising. And we're still able to drive business to here, right? So what are we doing? We're trying to kind of break up a gigantic business. So the personal service business, 1.7 trillion in 2016. It's a ginormous market, right? So also there's a large potential for doing something where you can really have a large impact. Another thing is that professional services has gone from being like a little bit more old-fashioned consulting type of work to being more high-tech and involving more people and a lot more data than what was just 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And then this was kind of the core problem that we wanted to solve when we built the company, was that even to this day, 66% of all projects fail in one way or the other, right? So that means they either come in too expensive, they either come in too slow, or they come in without delivering the value that they promised in the beginning, right? So that's quite a big problem to tackle. We are not there yet, right? But we are I think a good step of the way. And why and how are we doing that? We're doing that with AI. And AI can also, I think, that's also a thing for if you guys are talking to investors. When you say AI, a lot of investors become a little bit skeptical, right? Because I think they see a lot of stuff that claims to be AI, but it's not AI. So I think if AI is something that you want to pursue, right, it should really be, there should be a meaningful use case for putting AI into whatever you're building, right? How many of you guys are in a startup or in a small business that is doing something with AI? Okay, not that many. All right. These slides are really weird. It's like cut off. Half of it is cut off. Right now, we're 46 people sitting in Copenhagen, 13 nationalities, and as we like to see it, one friendly AI. So one thing we're seeing also is from the customer side. I like to get the badges on here, right? Because we're getting a lot of awards, so I like to show them. One thing we've seen when building AI and implementing AI in the hands of our customers is that if you build something and they don't understand why it's producing the results it's producing, then you immediately become skeptical about the outcomes of the AI, right? So imagine I'm asking an AI, is 4 or 5 the right answer, and the AI says 6. Then I'm confused as a user, right? So it might be correct that it's actually 6, right, and not 4 or 5. But if I don't understand why it came to that reasoning, then I won't believe it, right? And then I'll go with my intuition instead, even though it might be completely wrong, right? So an important thing of implementing AI in any product, I think, is to surface how that decision was made off of the machine and presented to the user, right? So I think that's quite important. So again, I think seeing Anders' question here repeated, right? I think that the first question you should ask yourself when you are thinking about implementing AI or looking at something with AI is like, is it core to the product you're offering, right? If it just sounds nice and it's something you can put in the pitch or stuff like that, right? Then it's probably not going to work, right? You need to make sure that you have a proper use case that in a meaningful or plausible way can be built, right? By one or more people that have experience doing that, right? And then the second part, which is also quite difficult, is do you have access to the knowledge, right? Do you have access to the people that can actually produce this? Because as you probably have seen, AI, people that know, puts AI on the CV, they are in fairly high demand. So they can be quite difficult to get a hold of, right? So if you don't have the skills yourself, you need to be able to, in some way or form, attract those people to help you build it, right? So that's another thing that's also quite key. And I think if you're an AI engineer and you go to Silicon Valley, you can make $400,000 or $500,000 a year just by sitting and coding, right? So it's quite profitable. And then I'd say again, another thing is how special are your needs, right? So by that I mean, are you, let's say this example, I'm building a product and I need some sort of image recognition thing, right? Image recognition thing is fairly generic, right? There's a lot of known methods around it. Maybe it makes sense in that case that I actually go look at some of the standard stuff that's there, right? If I'm doing some more kind of groundbreaking research, then you have to probably consider, does it make more sense that I build it myself, right? I think if I see Jonas down there from Apsu, right? So I'm pretty sure they're not buying their AI from a vendor, right? They're building themselves because it's core to the value that they're providing in their business. So I've actually found this that was quite interesting from BCG that kind of shows you a matrix of when should you buy versus build, right? So obviously this is not going to be the answer to everything, right? But I think it's quite interesting that where's the red dot? That if you're building something that has high value, right? You can produce a lot of value for your customers, and you have access to a proprietary data pool, or you can build a proprietary data pool. Then you're here, right? That's great. That's good space to be in, right? If you have, the value you're providing is not very high, right? So that could be, he has an example in a little while showing street signs, right? It's not super high value, right? But if you can produce a lot of it, then it might make sense, right? And being here is like, it can work, but it's pretty difficult if you're just analyzing Wikipedia data, right? Anybody can do it. I can build an algorithm, analyze Wikipedia data. You can build an algorithm, analyze Wikipedia data, right? That's really hard to protect in any meaningful way, right? And then you obviously have kind of low tech, low differentiated stuff, right? And if you want to make that work, you just have to pump out a really gigantic amount of volume to make that work as a business, right? So luckily we are here, right? Good space to be in. So we built our own AI team based off of two-pronged approach to doing it, right? So we have enrolled with University of Copenhagen and ITU to help us with more of the kind of hardcore research part, right? So DICO, for instance, has a fairly new, I think it's opened last year, AI machine learning department, right? And they help us build some of the more kind of basic research. So the problem with what we're building is, and that it takes a little while to build, is that we are doing something that no one has done before. When I presented this to the university, they're like, Dennis, this is impossible. It's like the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I mean, no one can do this, right? And then we started building tiny blocks and made them work. And now we're kind of taking those blocks, individual blocks that work, right, and putting them together to build something bigger, right? So one thing, I don't think actually Jakob will show it, but one thing that we are in close beta with is an AI that's able to 100% plan a project for you without any human intervention, right? So it basically means that it can plan the project for you you only have to do minor tweaks to it, right? So obviously it's a rough state, but it's starting to work, coming off of those small building blocks we've been working on for like 2 years now, right? And then basically building out our own team. We've had quite good success getting people that were fresh out of school. So not that much work experience, but a lot of, enthusiasm and, a lot of kind of, I want to try and build something that no one has done before. So for a lot of them, that's a pretty cool thing to go do. Instead of going to, let's say, IBM or somewhere else where you can go and just sit in a big office and do something that will probably be super boring. So a thing about kind of then producing value is also, we need to increase customers' value of the product, right? So I had a talk with a job candidate actually, I think it was yesterday, and she said something that I thought was really interesting. She said, like, Dennis, come on, no one cares about forecast. No one gives us, right? What they care about is, can you provide value to them, right? And I think that's quite key in what we're building. So you really need to make sure that what you're doing is actually producing value. Then another cool thing is if you make this AI thing work right, and you can actually make people use it, then you will actually build more data that you can then again feed the engine with, right? And then as soon as that engine gets fed with more data, it just becomes better and better and better, right? So over time, the AI will be very, very good, right? It might start out roughly as we heard about Siri, right? But the more you feed it, the better it becomes. And then you want to obviously provide a data network effect. So basically taking this data you have, so instead of trying to get like a little bit of data, you want to get a little bit of data from a lot of customers, right? So if you get a little bit of data from a lot of customers, then you basically are able to say a lot of statistically meaningful things about certain things, right? So I think that's also quite a key thing about this.
So has anybody found Valdo yet? You shouldn't, because you should never send a man to do a machine's job, right? So, is that not animating? I guess it's not animating. That is an AI that finds Valdo. And it is an animation. The idea is, of course, that you can do an AI that does a simplistic task like this, but it is probably not worth automating, at least not in the sense. But often when we talk about AI, we do talk about automation as a general term, and automation is fantastic. It's what we love about saving time, becoming more efficient, all the things we love, saving employees. And I personally, I love automation, and I have this example from a Russian company. It's called Jitbit, who had a terminal build engineer who was like working in the terminal. And when he left the company, they had to look at his code, and it turned out he had basically automated everything. He had made scripts for all these daily tasks. So he has a script that was called Hangover. So if he wasn't having an open terminal at 8:45 in the morning, it would send an email saying he was working from home that day, and then he had like a list of excuses it would randomly pick an excuse from. He also had Kumar Asshole, which was one of their customers, and it would look at emails from Kumar, and it would look at like excuse and sorry, and if it did that, it would roll back the latest deployment and take the backup, and then it would automatically send an email to Kumar saying, "I have your back, man." So basically, Kumar apparently had sent a lot of times where he had screwed up the build. And he also had fucking coffee, which I think is excellent. They didn't know this when they were actually going through his code, but their coffee machine was online. He had somehow managed to make a script that would take 17 seconds from you started the script and then pour a latte, and that was the time it took from his seat down in the terminal up to the coffee machine. So that's a fantastic thing. Automation is great, but the problem is, of course, that automation should be worth it. And when it comes to AI, it is often, it takes a very long time, especially if you, as we are doing at Forecast, are trying to build something from the bottom up. And again, just like with Valdo, does this image contain a street sign? So now you can apparently hear me more, even though there's no sound coming out the speakers. Okay, it's for the recording. So does this image commit its reside? Of course, an AI could do that. And you all know this capture pure training thing. This is where you train the AI, the thing that will make you question the reality of real life concepts like, is the pole part of a sign or is it not? You will question that and be, I don't know if I should select the poles. But this is of course a way to train image recognition in a way that Google said it would be smart if we could actually have people doing that, so they made another solution. But the problem is, what are we actually training? It's worth it because then we can start knowing where there are signs and we can read those signs later with another AI. But does it actually have like environmental validity if they come to Denmark and they have trained it to, for example, find this is a bicycle sign? Will they also recognize a Danish one, especially since we have different kinds of bicycle signs? So that's of course the problem. So when it comes to these kind of things, it is good if you think about how you make a profitable AI. So I'm going to take a little bit of the same perspective. And what is a profitable AI in our perspective? It's like this money-making AI, and it has 3 components. And I want to compare it to medicine because I think that's at least an industry where you get a lot of money out of if you are successful. And it kind of have the same, like quite a lot of time to build up or find the right medicine. The first thing is it should cure a pain. No shit, right? It should cure a pain, but it should also be something that becomes better over time. So you might have a first version of some medicine, but if you can make it have less side effects, if you can have some way, a better way every time, and especially when it comes to AI, where it is something you could make part of your product. The last thing is it should be personalized. We all heard about personalization, and that is great. We have hundreds of years of research about how you do statistics for medicine, but you're still going to end up in a situation where this type of drug will work on 60%, but I might be part of the 40%. So if I can somehow instead get medicine I'm pretty sure will work on me, for example, by adding biomarkers, that's going to be better. And if we compare that to like how we have tried to build our AI in forecast, then we have tried to find a real pain in project management. And one of the biggest pains for the professional services industries are that they are giving proposals to potential clients. So proposal is where you give them a price for a certain amount of work that needs to be done. If you underestimate the amount you will send, like if you underestimate it, you will lose money, you will have to spend more hours, your employees will spend more hours, and that will cost you. If you overestimate, you might lose to competitors because you have given a too high a price. So being able to at least being strategic around giving the right price on a basis or foundation of what the actual project length is going to be, that's very interesting. That's a real pain. What we have done in the product, and which Danish just mentioned, which has taken a lot of data and a long time, is to take all the data we have from different companies and the data we could gather and buy, and then train an AI that based on people's roles, their past experiences, will give an idea of if you set a low and a high for how much time a task will take, it will say within that high and low, what is the actual estimate? Normally you would do like the average, but we're trying to say, well, this type of task typically takes longer, so we're going to put it closer to the high. This is just to zoom in from the product, where we call it forecast because we named forecast, but that is the pain we cure, because just that change that we're saying 4 hours instead of what is that, 3.5, is a big change when it comes to looking at an entire project. And the second thing is, of course, people in this industry are billing their customers. So billing their clients, right? And when they do that, they do it based on time registrations. So we end up when people actually enter their time registrations, we get a final answer on how much time does this individual task actually take. Which means that every time people complete a task, we will have a solution to the problem. So every time somebody has completed a task, we know what the real answer were, we know what the low and high were, we know what we suggested in our AI, and we can now keep training the AI. So that's a great way to not just have an AI like image recognition that kind of does its job, but doesn't really get better. Here, every time people use the product, it gets better. That also means that when you start up in a product like ours, well, in the beginning, we will use company data, taking bits of data from a lot of companies, from the data that are publicly available. But over time, we will skew you more and more towards using only your own data. Well, these type of employees or these type of tasks typically are faster or slower. And that's where it becomes really interesting, because now the product is just not a product like anything you can buy. Now it's a product for me. It's a product that works for our organization. And that's what I think is a profitable AI. So the real pain is here. There's also like training. The training is also something we try to put into the product so it doesn't feel everybody hates to register time. So we try to make it part of the product in different ways. And of course, it is personalized. So the method is kind of start with the end, right? You want to have a real pain, but also start with the start. Because normally when you start an AI, you would train it, but you have to consider, can we keep doing this? Can we keep starting with this start? Can we keep doing what we were doing in the beginning? So Google kind of completely took and separated those two. So when they have the captures, it's actually separated from Google Maps. Google Maps doesn't get better at recognizing signs when you use Google Maps. It gets better at other stuff. But the Google Maps doesn't recommend you a new way, at least not yet. They say, you seem to be liking driving not on highways so often. Should you take this road instead? It's not doing that yet, but Google, of course, excels and can do that if they want to. So start with the end, start with the start, and then, of course, make it something that helps me. Why is this profitable? And now, since we are with a lot of investors, I have my own investor I'm a fan of, and that's Sarah Tavel. Sarah Tavel has made her own Tavel hierarchy of engagement, and I think that's it's a method for talking about how to actually make a billion-dollar company. And one of the things I really like about her is, like, of course, the first thing you do is you start growing engaged users by the users completing the core action. For us, it would probably be like running a project. But the second thing is, of course, you have to retain users by making the product better when they use it. And I think that's an amazingly important thing to remember. Like, Facebook becomes better if you use it more. If you invite friends, if you write update, it becomes better. That's why it's such a good product, and retaining people if they use it. But if you can really have that, you're on your way. And then the third thing, and the difficult thing, is of course to create these virtuous loops. But if you can just get to that second step where you actually make the product better, they even call it accruing benefits. The more you use the product, the better it gets. And then use this data to improve the experience for the user. If you can get to that point, I would say you have a pretty strong product for getting your first financial rounds up and going. So that's it. Thank you.